Glenn Greenwald calls out Mitt Romney over his public display of acknowledging that we are in a proxy war. So let me bring up the tweet here. And this is something Mitt Romney put out himself. Mitt Romney put this out, and let's read, and then I'll play the video. Let me pause it first so it doesn't go too far, and then I have to refresh. All right, so we'll leave it there. All right, so Senator Mitt Romney says the single most important thing we can do to strengthen America relative to China is to see Russia defeated in Ukraine. A weakened Russia detours this is China's, and that's what they're doing, the CCP, is the China Communist Party or something like that, territorial ambition, and halts Putin's vision of reestablishing the old Soviet Union. Supporting Ukraine is in our interest. That's what he says as a caption for this video here, and let's listen.
The single most important thing we can do to strengthen ourselves relative to China is to see Russia defeated in Ukraine, because they're allies, and Russia being weakened weakens their ally China. I mean, so and by the way, being able to take an amount which equals about 5% of our military budget, but actually less than 5% of our military budget each year to help the Ukrainians is about the best national defense spending I think we've ever done. We're losing no lives in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are fighting heroically against Russia that has 1,500 nuclear weapons aimed at us. It's like,
what does it mean to say we're losing no lives? Who is we? Are we on this? This is two things it's showing. He doesn't see us, like the United States doesn't see us as part of the team, as their team. Because if he can say we're losing no lives, how can he say that when Ukrainians are losing lives? But if you're able to say we are losing none, that means you don't see us as part of Ukrainians. You don't even see us as part. They're doing the fighting. That's how you see this, as a proxy. That is by definition a proxy. Somebody else doing the bidding for you.
Yep.
That is a proxy. And then they want to toss in, they're being so courageous. That's why they're trying to describe the Ukrainian fighting as courageous, because they know they're being used as cannon fodder. So had you seen this video before, JB? Had you heard about it or seen the clip?
No, but just to harp on a point that you were making, have you ever seen X-Men: The Last Stand?
I think I have. A lot of them are mixed in.
It's the one where Jean turns into the Phoenix, and and they kill off Professor X and all that. Okay.
Yeah.
Remember in the last final battle where Magneto stops Juggernaut from attacking the people and says, "And chess, the pawns go first." Right? Same thing. In chess, the pawns go first. Who are the Ukrainians that are fighting? They're the pawns. They're the ones that die first. They're the ones that are being made to die just so that the United States can have a war. The thing is that the United States is doing this because they know how much we hate war. They know how unpopular the Iraq war was and the war in Afghanistan. So they've smarted up. They go, well, we're just not going to use our people. We're going to use somebody else's people. And we're going to risk their lives for the sake of us growing our power. So this is the reason for that proxy war between Ukraine and Russia. And so this is basically what Mitt Romney is saying. He is saying and smiling like a game show host, because he looked like one, that, hey, all we got to do is just sacrifice their lives and no blood lost on ours.
Man,
that's exploitation, people. That's exactly what it is. And if you care about life in general, then you care about the lives of innocent Ukrainians too, just as much as you care about the lives of innocent Russians and Palestinians and Iraqis. But this shows where Mitt Romney really is.
And it does, and it also shows, it's a reflection of what's ingrained in the United States DNA, and that is how it's in our DNA that we view our lives more than everybody else's. And I don't, when I say ours, I'm talking about white American lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you start the way we started with genocide against the natives and enslaving the dignified slaves, our ancestors, if you start that way, you know, like, you're not ever going to get that out of your DNA. That's why we still have racism 400 years, 500 years, growing on 500 years. That's why you have all of these things still happening. We're just like, we got progress. We're coming a little bit of ways. You know what I mean? That's the reason why we have to describe things that way. Go ahead, JP.
I got one thing to say, and I think you've already connected this in your mind too. But let me know if it connects. Okay, so you know how, and I say this all the time, Black people are the canary in the coal mine. If they're going to do it to us, they're going to do it to white people, right? They're literally exploiting white people in order to fight a proxy war.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. You're white people, you need to be outraged about what the United States is doing in Ukraine. Be outraged. Be anti-imperialist and let the United States know, whoa, you're doing this against us. Because the United States has done it at proxy wars in African countries.
Yeah.
They've been doing. They're basically doing to Europe what they already did to Africa. They're just now graduating to going to, okay, now screw the rest of the poor whites too. So if they did it to us, they're going to do it to you. It's just a matter of time when it's going to happen. You see, here's the thing. 40% of people who are incarcerated in this country are Black, even though we're only 13% of the population. But the other 60% or so are white. And they're also being enslaved, because we all know the 13th Amendment, it doesn't end slavery for people who are incarcerated. So now you have white slaves, right? Same thing with war. They did proxy war with us in many different African countries. Now, guess what? They're doing proxy wars in Europe. They're also doing it against white people. Why? Because they look at the people, especially those Eastern Europeans, as white trash. That's exactly what this is. So ultimately, the racism and the xenophobia, it will also pour onto you. This is why it is imperative for you to be anti-racist as well as anti-imperialist. Because if not, they're going to get you too.
Yeah. They're going to get you coming or get you going, JB. All right. All right. So 40 some odd more seconds. Let's listen.
It's like, so we're diminishing and devastating the Russian military for a very small amount of money relative to what we spend in the rest of defense. A weakened Russia is a good thing. It tells China to rethink their territorial ambition. It tells Russia, perhaps most importantly, that the Putin vision of reestablishing the Russian Empire and grabbing the old former Soviet republics, that's not something that's going to work. It is very much in America's national interest, in our national interest, to help Ukraine. And the best thing we can do for America is to see people who have nuclear weapons aimed at us getting weaker.
So much in there. I like their feet kind of dangling, because it gives the stupid, immature child like look of a person when he's dangling his feet as he's talking. because that last part of what he said, JB, it's disgusting. This is really disgusting, and you can hear the white supremacy in this sort of outlook on foreign policy. Go ahead, JB.
CJ, look, I was up with you until you talked about the feet dangling. Listen, I got short legs, man. That's not fair, CJ. How you gonna do that? Now I feel attacked on RBN. Come on, man. Don't do that to me. I got short legs, man. Why you gotta do that to me? Funny. Just because you're tall.
I'm not tall.
You ain't tall. Don't do that. Why you gotta do that to me, brother? I thought over here, bro. Right.
Yeah, I just thought that was funny because he was dangling his feet at certain points to where it was like, man, you're saying some of the most ridiculous stuff right now. So thought that was funny. But here's Glenn Greenwald, and why I said this segment is called Glenn Greenwald Crushes. I think it says crushes Mitt. Let's see what Glenn chimes in about. He quote tweets Mitt, and he says, as it is true of John Bolton, Senator Mitt Romney has been and continues to be one of DC's most vocal, steadfast, enthusiastic supporters of Joe Biden's war policies in Ukraine. Every GOP candidate on last week's stage, except Vivek and DeSantis, expressed the same support. And this is why it's sort of it's an issue in the GOP, because their three top candidates polling wise all are talking against the Ukraine war. This is why, to me, I think this is another reason why they kind of stepped up their game against Trump, because even though I don't believe he's going to go through with it. I think he's just as bad as a warmonger as the Democrats. It's just that he's talking the talk the same way he did when he was talking to talk about fighting against the swamp monsters before he got elected. He did that. He sells the populism, and he's doing it now. And JB, let me go through a couple of comments, and then I'll get your comments. Here's Max Blumenthal commenting on the same video, and Max says, Senator Mitt Romney, and look what he puts. He puts R next to his name. He says Raytheon instead of the name of the state. That's pretty funny. Proclaims, quote, we're losing no lives in Ukraine, end quote, like the rest of the proxy war's satanic architects. He regards Ukrainians as bullet stoppers whose lives have no value behind ending those Russians. And that's the point that I was making. Vivek actually chimes in, and this is one of the candidates that's against, in his rhetoric, Ukraine funding, and he said this at the debate, the GOP debate. Wrong again, Senator Romney. The single most important thing we can do to strengthen America relative to China is to disband the Russia-China military alliance and reduce our economic dependence on China. Instead, let me expand it. Where was I? Instead, we're driving Russia further into China's hands by the day while Joe Biden sleepwalks us into a major conflict. Sadly, the GOP establishment aids and abets it dailies. I don't know what abets it means in this context. Abets, but yeah, I don't know what that means. I don't think it. Do I have any other? I think that's the only one. Actually, no, let me play this one and then get your comment, because it goes together. Mm-hmm. So you hear that one where he talks about Cannon Father. He essentially says the same thing here with a little bit difference. That's why I want to add it in before we get your comment. So let's listen to this here.
You have a unique perch in your chair on the Foreign Affairs Committee. President Biden recently asked for more funding for Ukraine, sending more arms and weapons and dollars to Ukraine. Give us an update in terms of where you think we are and what should we be doing to be most helpful in that space.
Well, I begin by saying that instead of thinking about, well, if Biden requests it, it must be wrong. There's my team and his team.
Yeah.
And instead saying what's in the best interest of the national security for the.
Here's the bipartisanship when it comes to war. He's like, come on, guys. Instead of saying it came from Joe Biden, so it can't be good. Come on. This is war. We have our friends at the weapons manufacturers we got to take care of. They're making bombs to kill people that we don't care about. Continue.
For the United States of America. And our biggest global threat over the coming century certainly comes from China. China has one major ally, well, more than one when you consider North Korea, but one major ally, and that's Russia. Yeah. And so weakening Russia is very much in our interest if we're concerned about China. And of course, Russia itself has 1,500 nuclear warheads aimed at the United States of America. So seeing Russia struggle in Ukraine, having its military.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were going to say that bullshit.
It's clown shit. And I'm going to rewind it. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's clown. This is a joke. This is a joke, JB.
Has one major ally, well, more than one when you consider North Korea, but one major ally, and that's Russia. Yeah. And so weakening Russia is very much in our interest if we're concerned about China. And of course, Russia itself has 1,500 nuclear warheads aimed at the United States of America. So seeing Russia struggle in Ukraine, having its military decimated without any American loss of life,
is not decimated.
It's really quite extraordinary. So for the last 2 years, we have been spending about 5% of our military budget by sending weapons to Ukraine to help them in their battle against Russia. It is very much in our interest. Yeah. We spend about $750 to $800 billion a year on our national defense. That's to protect us from people like Russia. To take 50.
That $800 billion is what's on paper. The reason we never pass audits is because everybody knows the funding is well over $1 trillion off paper. Also, on paper is 800. Go ahead.
Just to add to your point, that our nuclear program is actually under the Department of Energy, not the Department of Defense. So when you add on the nuclear program onto the Department of Defense, it's over $1 trillion.
There you go.
50 of that each year, and use that to strengthen Ukraine is the smartest thing we could do, and probably the most cost-effective and certainly life-effective way we could weaken someone who has the potential to become an enemy.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I'm so glad you framed it in terms of this is not a red-blue issue. This is a freedom and national security issue, both for.
This is a bipartisan time to where we're going to set aside all of our disagreements and agree to kill millions, or let's say hundreds, if not thousands, of people that we don't care about. And I'm not going to play the entire thing for the sake of time because I've got a couple of more segments I want to get to, important segments I want to get to. But my final sort of brief comment on this to wrap it up, because I said the bulk of what I had to say, but to kind of put a bow on it, what Mitt Romney, what I feel is a indication of a failing empire is how more and more they're just boldly saying things publicly. Mm-hmm. Boldly saying things publicly that 20 years ago they would not. It's because the old way of them propagandizing people haven't worked. The reason he's saying this, he's trying to convince people we have to still help Ukraine because the public support's not there. Over 50% of the public don't think we should be giving them more money. Yeah. But they're not going to listen to us. All they're going to do is go on TV and tell us why we got to keep supporting them. This is just shows how this is not a democracy, JB. But any final brief words you had to sum up your thoughts on this, JB?
Absolutely. If you take everything that Mitt Romney said and you turn it on him, you can basically say, well, America has 3,708 nuclear warheads pointing at the rest of the world. So it's imperative for us to actually make sure that the United States doesn't continue its hegemony and control over the world so that we can actually build a better future outside of the strength and the stranglehold that the United States has on the rest of us. They can actually make that argument. And that's literally double the amount of nuclear warheads
crazy
that Russia has. And so they'll talk about, oh, well, it's pointed at other countries. Well, guess what? The United States basically has theirs pointed at everybody else. So it's rules for thee, but not for me. Why? Because he thinks that the United States can do no wrong. Or the United States has, they can just rule carte blanche over the entire world because our way is justified. We have freedom, and liberty, right? Even though that's not really the case. And so when somebody like Mitt Romney goes on these channels and start talking about the threat of Russia or China, like for instance, what is so threatening about China in the first place? Like, what has China actually done to us or the world that is so bad?
It's not a military threat. It's not a military threat.
No, nothing. Because here's the thing. Like, how many bases does China have around the world in comparison to the United States?
I think they got one or two or a handful. I don't think they got over 5.
I think 3 at the most.
Yeah.
And then the entire thing about the Uyghurs, that's already been debunked. So
yeah,
they can't rely on that. And then they'll be like, well, all of our jobs are there. Well, who gave the jobs away? So what is there? Okay, real shit. The only reason why the United States hates China is because they're jealous. Because China got the bigger dick. That's
pretty much.
That's basically what it is. And they're like, oh my God, we have to kill them. Why? Why? Just because they're doing better financially? Oh, it's because the Communist Party of China, the CPC, is actually doing better for their people than what the United States could under capitalism. Got it. That's it.
And they're big mad. They're big mad about it. So
big mad.
They're big mad.